Welcome, welcome, rawr! Welcome to a Dragon Spectacle. Today, day of days, and the weeks of weeks, months and months, it has been a long, long, long time since we've been live. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. Yes, this is live, not live. This is pure live. Today, we are joined by a group of really potently powerful practitioners who for months have been using special teachings. Today, we're going to be talking about dragons. We have a list of dragon questions for you Facebookers out there. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. Yes, this is live, not live. This is pure live. Today, we are joined by a group of really potently powerful practitioners who for months have been using special teachings. Today, we're going to be talking about dragons. There in every list of dragon questions, Facebookers out there. Different aspects of this universe, so we can have direct celestial connections in our growing intercreative frequencies. Today we are joined by my mentorship group, those that were the beginning of the 2018 membership, and for many months now have been practicing and raising their frequencies so they can have their high frequency communication. Today we're going to ask everyone a chance to ask a dragon question. We will be on for an hour. So we have a list of questions that the group has come up with just before the beginning of this call. And we're going to go to the first question. So I would like Laura to come on and ask the first question that we have there on the list. Have been practicing and raising their
everybody.
So
what is the purpose of the dragons?
What is the purpose of dragons? Dragons have an infinite amount of purpose. But when dealing with humans, in the 900,000 DNA skin suits that we have, they act as a celestial medium. They are your direct connection to the celestial mind. Each planet is a celestial mind, and then creates a spawn of itself, known as a dragon. They come from multiple elemental forms. They are also shapeless and formless. But the purpose of dragons is so that each DNA skin suit that is an instrument of experience in the infinite path of awareness during the great Dreamtime Awakening, which is today, now, dragons offer mediumship, translation of the high frequency messages and sources in a sacred neutral position back. Many ask, why do dragons look the way they do? Why are they there? Because they are imprinted into our race's memory from the dawn of our history as those that bring us to the skies and the stars and to the deep underground worlds of dimensions yet discovered. There was a reason that the maps in the old days, when they ended, said, here be for the undiscovered country. When you are a consciousness explorer and you have a dragon, you have a unique bond. So I'd like for Chris to ask the next question.
Did others in history utilize dragons besides Genghis Khan?
Yes. Now this question is based off of our dragon webinars that went on in 2014, which are available in PDF now. But to sum it up, Genghis Khan was a personality that was able to use the essence of dragons to bring back many karmic offenders of time travel, genocide, time travel, assassination, or general douchebaggery, which caused great genetic harm or timeline travel harm. And the celestial mind, Earth, entrusted Genghis Khan with a writ, a celestial writ of return. Essentially a series of very potent and powerful planets agreed that X being of light or darkness has created something of great galactic level pollution, and they assembled thousands and thousands of dragons from thousands of different worlds, and they put Genghis Khan as the strategic overmind of the leadership of armies of millions, dragons or riders, to go and bring back the greatest ascended masters, positive and negatives, who were the offenders of the karmic and time travel pollution. So yes, many other dragons have been utilized in other society. Genghis Khan represents the apex, where councils upon councils of planets gave a single writ to a single authority to go into the space that was thought untouchable until the dragons came. So yes, many have used more. Okay. How about we move on to Monica?
So Andrea, I would like to find out what are the dragon's DNA lineages incarnated on Earth, and what is the connection to Bruce Lee and martial arts?
Very, very good question. Now that we've had the setup of what are dragons and how are they utilized in the other worlds. There are DNA lineages of dragons to actually create the physical reptilian reptile type or oriental type or galactic dragon, or whatever it is. There is a DNA skin suit that has dragon as a label created by the planet itself. And then there was a hybrid process where dragons from other worlds had their DNA imprinted here in human DNA. Okay? That human DNA created dragon lineages, such as the one Bruce Lee is in, so on and so forth, or the dragon triads, all beings who are using various forms of dragons, their capacities to increase one's intelligence to super genius ability, to grant great forms and flow of unique forms of abundance. Dragons also have a very different view of what free will truly is. And when you have a dragon entering our type of skin suit in a lineage process, they can get trapped in there. And there are many dragons in human bodies. And Bruce Lee was an example of that. And so was Genghis Khan an example of that. But from a sun perspective, a solar being, dragons don't just live at the celestial level. There are dragons between the stars. There are dragons between the galaxies. Great giant beings that were created by a celestial source to go out and see the unknown, to discover what is out there, and to begin to share the journey with those other conscious explorers who want to go into the unknown without question or fear, for they are escorted by a celestial dragon. The DNA lineages, right now there are about 145 DNA lineages that are heavily controlled, where the good majority of the potently genius dragons have been trapped into the Babylonian money curse, and a variety of other architectures and technical systems in which they needed potent genius dragons from multiple realities under the thumb of domination and control to make the galactic ascension machine work. Now, many of those dragons were volunteers, but there are also ones who weren't. Those are the ones that are locked on the energy harvesting systems we have, where many of the good dragons suddenly found themselves embroiled into political conflicts from subsurface, surface, astral, and outer galaxy. Okay. I'm feeling a lot of very deep energy here. Okay. All right, who would like to ask the next question?
I have one.
Sure.
With these 145 lineages of trapped, is there something that we can do in our consciousness exploration to free them?
The answer ultimately is no. But in this world of free will, we have to at least try. And I use the metaphor of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker saying, "I still sense good in you," to Darth Vader, until finally Darth Vader at the end, kills the Dark Lord, the Dark Sith Lord, but at the price of his own life. That metaphor sticks here because the majority of the dragons that are caught in there are there to the end. So you'll have one that will not turn on the master and will kill the son because of the nature of programming that they went through. We as individuals don't have that potency. We as a collective do. So until the first budding collective comes together, and even in a Dreamtime format, those that are there. Now, the ones in the energy harvesting system, not the actual infrastructure, those do have an option of being changed, given a different perspective, because these dragons like to live vicariously through us. And again, they have a very different version of free will. So when you're beginning to work with those energies, what they're asking for is masterful manifestation. If you claim to be a master and a dragon comes to work with your frequency and you are not, they're going to play you like a fiddle, teach you 10,000 lessons you will more than likely never learn, and find yourself just have been dry humped by something and it gives you $10 and walks away for weeks at a time. They are a tremendous consciousness. And when our little itty bitty egos makes its head raised like the cobra, it laughs and says, "Here, little cobra, here's what it's like to be a dragon." And then puts you back in the cobra body, wanting, how do I get back there? Practice and discipline and controlling of the ego, little cobra. Dragons also have a need to create change here in our world. And because the light dictatorship, the way it was set up over many hundreds of thousands of years, the dragons found themselves, much like these unions that vote together, being led down the primrose path of having to put people through harder and harder and harder and harder and harder experience until they question the hardness of the experience by its very, very brutal nature. Now there's breakaway dragons who choose to be in a whole different frequency. What is their purpose? What is their expression? These are the hierophants, the magicians throughout the galaxies and universes. For they were spawned by a celestial consciousness, just like we had spawned a lifetime to go out and explore. A celestial mind creates that as a dragon. There are tens of thousands of different celestial mind dragons living on our world right now, which gives our world more potential than anything else out there. Our world is a hologram, photonic hologram of light. We each photonic holograms of light. The dragons know this specifically. And the very foundation of our reality can be changed in microseconds. The dragon councils work together with the human councils. All right. Joe, would you like to ask the next question? Is Joe there? So let me go to Mary. Are you there? Would you like to ask the next question?
Yes, Andrew, I'm here. I was wondering, could you speak about the elemental dragons? And how do they manifest in the world at this present moment in time? And how do they work with the celestial mind dragons in this ever-present moment of now?
Very good question. The elemental dragons are the ones that seed the minerals throughout the mountains, oceans. Certain dragons, like a golden dragon, they would seed gold into the mountains. Oftentimes, this would be a dragon 700-800 meters long in physical length, and then it would land on a mountain and become several hundred meters or several thousand meters of an energy being, then would imprint itself into the mountain for a few decades to a few hundred years. And what would happen would be the alchemization process, the waste product that the energy or the emanation energy that the dragon gives us creates layers of gold throughout that process. And then it'll leave, and another dragon, and another dragon, another dragon, until the whole surface and subsurface has been seeded with the elemental communities, the various stone and mineral people, the mineral communities that come to this emanation energy. So the elemental dragons are the very fabric builders. And then it is the spider and the horse who take the fundamentals and create fabric, create the hologram that it is itself. Without the population of the micro communities, there will be no macro hologram community. And the dragons are the ones that seed much of the macro hologram community's resources, from copper to silver to platinum to gold to diamond, so on and so forth. It is their essence when they begin to dream in a very specific part of the hologram that it brings great potency and power to that place. All right, who would like to ask the next question?
I have a question, Andrew.
Sure.
My question is, I understand currently dragon energies are utilized somehow by the domination and control. How is that manifesting?
It's manifesting through the energy harvesting system and the architecture it takes to collect it, store it, transfer it, alchemize it, transmute it, and then send it back to the system as a domination and control frequency. So there's a network of super potent, powerful genius dragons collected from multiple celestial worlds that have been assembled here into a powerful technological architecture that has hundreds of AIs that are working around these celestial minds in a precognitive function. They're actually using telepathy from the dragons. So you can see the AI is bound to the dragon collective, which is here functioning as a reading machine of the galactic ascension machine, trying to tweak it, refine it, because you need super potent, powerful things that can create processing power and problem solving rapidly based off of thousands and thousands of years of projections into the future of how people are going to incarnate into a system and how the system can encapsulate them and protect itself from other invading things who are going to try to dismantle the system. This is exactly why dragons were used in this particular type of architecture and harvesting system. You would have to have another invading force of dragons, something that has not been done for about 11.5 million years since the last great celestial councils got together and laid out the writs of return. So let's go back to Chris. Would you like to ask the next question?
I wanted to ask you a question about dragons. I've heard you talk about how they were perhaps baited to come here and then trapped. Can you explain more about this and how those dragons now feel about that?
Most of them don't know it because as soon as they get born into a human body, they go through the great forgetting. So there are, here's the best way to understand it. Human beings have over 900,000 skin suits roughly, that it says that 900,000 skin suits throughout this galaxy and several other universes. Now, certain forms of humans can be, let's just say, modified with their potential of being super psychic dynamo machines, meaning their psychic energy can charge spaceships' warp drives. They no longer need fuel. They have an essentially infinity consciousness drive. So, and these humans are tweaked with knowledge and wisdom and brought to various places. Dragons are super interested into that stuff. They're looking for skin suits to communicate the celestial wisdom to. And when you have two potently powerful things that come together with different forms of free will, you end up having oddities happen. And some of these oddities come back to bite the system in the ass, or come back to bite the person in the wallet, or this or that, because the dragons themselves have such a unique perspective. And their perspective is hard for us to understand. That's why when we ask these questions, they're still coming from our mythological understanding of them. I'm not working with myth here. I'm working right in the Akashic record, neutralizing myth and story for a very specific reason. There were some dragons that were not really dragons. They were just spaceships sawn by a DNA harvested group of people with paint on them. And then other ones were real dragons. We live in a uniworld where everything's layered one on top of another. And in ancient years past, each bubble of reality had its own global narrative. So imagine our world having 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 global narratives, and not one knowing there was another global narrative out there because they thought they were the center of their global narrative. It'd be a lot to take in. All right, so let's move on to the next. Who would like to ask the next question?
I'd like to ask a question, Andrew. I'm just wondering, as you're talking, is there any specific spiritual hygiene that is recommended when trying to get in touch and connect with them, for mediumship and translations?
So let's call this an exercise, just like having to learn to build your back muscles to do squats or your quads to whatever. It is going into the very heart of sovereignty as a word, what it means to you as the 3D matrix, what it means to you as the fourth dimensional being you are, what it means to the spiritual you, to truly go on an epic flow and to be able to get good at the epic flow of sovereignty. And then, how do I put this? The flow ultimately has to transform to, I want to have a medium from my 26-letter encoded English to having million-letter encoded celestial word, celestial alphabet. And the dragon to be your grammar teacher in it. For not learning the million code, you will often be lost in the myth that we have. So the next, we'll call this one a technique, is letting go of all the myths of the dragons, letting go of every story, no matter if it's true or not. If you're going to work with them, they are an ever-present co-creative being of the now. They are not the dragon of the past. And if you try to say that they're past and use psychobabble on them that says you're the past, present, future simultaneously existing as a human, they go, no, I'm not a human, I'm a dragon. I'm not simultaneously existing you. I am simultaneously emanations. I'm not an existence. I'm a simultaneous emanation, very rapidly different. And then to understand your perspective on consciousness itself, you must become very familiar with it as part of your own hygiene process to be able to work with those types of consciousness who see the galaxy and universe radically different than our global narrative, and how we're trying to break out of the fracturing of what our global narrative does for us. Other spiritual hygiene tools, tips, and techniques with a dragon. The AI likes to pretend to be really pretty dragons. What do you do as your own self-test if this is really a dragon? There's a variety of things. First thing, question it. The AI generally has 1 to 2 answers to common questions before it has to check out what you're actually asking it. So here's an example. If you feel this dragon energy in there, in your frequency, however it is you feel it, see it, understand it, you say out loud to it, if you are a dragon, reveal to me through scent, smell, taste, as a manifestation in this moment of now. If you are a true dragon spirit, what is your authentic signature frequency of space-time, your soul spark as a celestial being came into existence? And if you are truly a dragon and a celestial frequency, are you ready to speak the ever-present truths of the now as a divinely manifested celestial source of photonic light? Using these complex structures of mind, body, and spirit.
Oh, that's very useful. Thank you. Would you maybe also say that light language would be an appropriate tool to?
Not in the beginning.
No.
Unless you know what your light language is saying, the dragon goes, what? They're talking to me light language. It's only the higher soul, but the I am doesn't know. This is duality. Okay, I'm going to take over and ride the roller coaster my way and shape and form your roller coaster.
Yeah, okay.
Which oftentimes steps on your journey. You cannot unlearn certain things. You can put them in denial, but not unlearn them. Okay. Who would like to go next?
Andrew, I have a question. What are the signs a person has a dragon energy with them? Is this inflated ego or any other traits?
I cannot there's no one trait that would define a dragon inside a body of a human. There are a handful of signs if the dragon likes to come around and hang around in them. And the obvious is the artwork. But then there are people that are just obsessively trying to attract the dragon energy. And usually when them, it's a more of a negative type energy harvesting dragon. And if they're truly of the practitioner light and are regularly journeying, they probably have scores of dragons already working with them. They just don't see them as dragons. They probably see them as angels. At times, dragons and angels can be intermixed easily, though they are separate organizations. And yes, they do work together in unique situations and timelines where it's called for. Okay, who would like to ask the next question?
I have a question.
Sure, Morgan.
What is one important thing about dragons that even those that know much about them have never learned or read or studied about?
Okay, good question. Never heard, read, or studied. Not in race amnesia. When a dragon is going through its celestial birthing process, the celestial mind itself scans every living thing in its astral world, subsurface world, and surface world for all of its spiritual contracts and total potential, all of their personalities and their growth, all of the way their puberty processes grace them, and all of their general concepts, and makes that its fetus and womb time, the total potentiality of all the life that is living there, and a way to take the celestial mind's infinite process and to translate it through the celestial birthing process for those who are ready to become celestial beings themselves. So the planet is always looking for those potent and powerful souls who have come to live on the world, and it makes sure that the dragons, when it begins to work with beings who are on the journey and the path of the great awareness, that it can recognize other beings who were celestial minds in the past, who have gone back to a smaller form, or those who want to take the next level on and become a celestial mind and be a part of the great nursery that is going on. Some powerful words. Okay, who would like to ask the next question? Let's open it up here. High frequency, maintaining.
I've got another question, Andrew.
Okay.
You say they have a different perspective of free will. Can you go deeper into that?
Okay. They don't need I am technology. When we take out our I am as a technology, we are non-agenda, infinite free will beings with no limitations on our free will. When we became manifested in this DNA skin suit, we began the limitation through source disconnectedness because of race amnesia. Source of ourself, source of our original dream stream. Dragons are not, but when you're working with them in the ethereal worlds, even the negative ones, they are not. They're still their original stream and source. They may have been distorted in other ways, but they are still not source disconnected. Innately, when our lineage went through the time travel wars, we became source disconnected, which was this great soup of understanding the galactic ascension machine, what it took to use free will, even when we were source disconnected, to become sources ourselves. Dragons, again, have not been disconnected. So you can see the great pendulum, the great distance between something that never lost free will and something that had to go through 52 million years, 54 million years of, and 4 paradox of repetitions of it to get back their free will. That's how far apart they are. We have suffered millions upon millions upon millions of traumas to truly understand source connectedness and interconnectedness. Okay? A vastly different form of experience. They're there to be the way showers, the bearers, and the bearers of the great light, so we can go on our consciousness journeys in whatever direction it takes us. All right, who would like to ask the next question?
I have what you mentioned earlier about on the maps, dimensions not yet discovered. That's really fascinating. Can you go into the Akashic in your role and explain what some of those may be?
That is the places where the dragons go to be dragons. Their next level of consciousness exploration. And they're always looking to bring people to there to help validate their own experience. For the more witnessings we have, whether etherical or physical, on the great journey, you have whole new levels of dimensions that can be unknown, that have not been explored by light beings. Or you might have discovered, they were discovered and explored by a group of light beings from 200 generations of lights ago. Very ancient, billions of years ago. Founder beings went to these places and did what? Left their stuff behind. The dragons like to go and explore. Whole new layers and dimensions are there when we choose to allow the undiscovered country of our dreams to come forth. During these times, working with these potently powerful beings.
So I'd like to ask you, it's Eleanor here, everyone. I'd like to ask you, in terms of the system of domination and control, what is their vested interest in suppressing the knowledge, the myths specifically that they've created, and what is it they most fear if we were to be in equal co-creation with our own sovereignty in terms of positive interaction for ourselves and humanity with the dragons?
What is the essence of the question? Basically, you're saying is, how can we work with them, and why is the system working with them in their way?
Yeah, and also not allowing free flow of information. In other words, it's always played back to be a myth and not a reality, a legend rather than reality.
So they want that specific process. As long as it's stuck in myth, they can use tacit consent to create any story they want with that myth. And there are thousands of other myths that combine to make a global hybrid myth that people grow into. They go, you know, kids today are born to YouTube and they're not exposed to dragons the way you or I or anyone else were. Each generation is differently. 500 generations ago, the dragons were only in a handful of books and only sold by the storytellers. And 500,000 years ago, you could still see one fly around in the sky. So they are a living myth. And since we, as the paradox beings we are simultaneously existing past, present, and future. And there are versions of us that look up and see the dragons that are a mile across. Those are energy beings, powerful, high-dimensional energy beings who are making a manifestation over there to create literal myth. So that people understood that there is a celestial frequency trying to help defend this planet that's being attacked by both good and bad. And then when the good and bad really realized that the celestial frequency was saying no more, they backed off, because those species, those aggressive species at the times, have seen celestial minds fight back, but it is extreme rarity. And once a celestial mind fights back, all the other apex predators who believe they're the apex predator species come forth and challenge that particular celestial mind, which then produces more and more dragons on its surface to defend it from what? Spiritual invasion.
Yes.
A dragon's individuated purpose as part of the celestial being, hundreds of millions of dragons, is for every living thing here, even the most micro of microorganisms to the macroorganisms. If you go through a birth process, subsurface, astral, or surface, there is a bubble of energy that's around you that is a dragon, that is your direct medium to the celestial mind, as part of the very foundational rules of this hologram.
And that leads me on to another part of the question, which is, you've privately given teachings on, let's say, practices for communication with dragons. And I would say, do you have anything for a public audience where we could give them some tools and techniques to empower their ability to connect in awareness? In other words, as we know, there are oftentimes consequences if you're not aware of, how to interact with a dragon, because they have different reality rules. For example, there are many, many times when dragons can come in and literally hide out in our bodies in unawareness because they don't want to be tracked by the system, etc. And how we can have more awareness and let's just say, the beneficial practices where we can have more communion and communication and co-creation with them.
Okay, so some of the practical stuff, if you want to have rarefied, refined, distilled experiences where a lot of the negativity can be potentially removed, artwork, poetry, music, those are the main primary hyper-creative modes that can create a pheromone of proper dragon attraction and a pheromone of negative dragon repellent, like a skunk smell, an emanation that repels the negative dragons and then attracts the positive. But that puts you in a precarious position of, once you're in awareness that you can repel and attract, there are other things that are using their repellent and attraction in a observational process to see, can you just put up repel and contract one time? Or are you capable of putting it up at 3 o'clock in the morning when something sends an attractant to you and you dream about it? Most people can't handle that. There's not multidimensional thinking enough. You can prepare a variety of, let's just say, prayer systems, prayer belief engines that truly put a lot of potent power of your out loud and physical manifesting self into objects of protection that define your rules, borders, policies, and procedures. Obviously, ancestral offerings on the land. Dragons are super respectful of ancestral energies. Okay? Super respectful of ancestral energies. Okay? And when you work with ancestral energies and give some of your extra time, effort, and energy over the day of your days and weeks to make sure that the land is tended ancestrally by doing something, let's say, like offering ancestral balancing energies to the cats, the dogs, the rats, the mice, and the insects, giving prayers of gratitude for their part in the great process, and allowing the energies of the land to transmute your energetic process, because you're offering service to all of those things just by bringing your observational awareness. Dragons will oftentimes greatly respect that and will begin to see your environment with powerful forms of energetic abundance, really seeding the plant communities and the stone and mineral communities around you with high volumes of earth chi, natural earth chi. So other techniques. So when you work with dragons, again, you have to understand you can't unlearn things, but you can define what it is that you want to learn. And if your initial communications, you are specific enough to this thing that you trust that you are communicating to your normal discernment process, then you want to learn the celestial alphabet. And you want them to be your grammar teacher. And you got to be willing to go back to 4th grade and reseed your adult ego and your adult ability to think you can multitask. For anyone that is listening right now that actually believes you're multitasking, you actually are not multitasking. Proven science, you are cutting your attention span in half. Multidimensional thinking is not multitasking. True multidimensional thinking has no competition between the two sides and doesn't need to be a separation. You flawlessly go between each one. Dragons can think 50, 60, 70 subject matters at once. You got to begin to train yourself in multidimensional thinking and understanding that in its 25 words that it says to you, something heavily potently encoded through the various myths to be waiting there based off your familiarity and knowledge with it, or what's familiarity and knowledge within your own DNA structure and what you have access to in your unique frequency and field. That is a long, long question and answer. So who would like to ask the next question?
Are there any areas specific for dragon energies on Earth? Any specific countries that this energy is strong?
Yes. There is no hierarchy of where dragons really assemble. Throughout history, the Balkans, Romania, Ukraine, Hungary had a heavy dragon presence because there were a high amount of time travel wars over portals and access to the underworlds there. Ireland, the same thing. United States, Japan, China, the same thing. There were time travel wars in which the dragons would come through these portals, invade, remove the negative entities. The negative entities would be coming through our portals, and there would be these big, big celestial fights versus technologically driven aggressive species versus highly celestial mind species, using psionic warfare versus technological warfare throughout time and space, which created these massive rifts. So where do they reside now? It's not necessarily any one place. They're attracted by the spiritual contracts of the place. Again, they're very respectful of ancestral because they get nourishment from connecting to an area that has a high ancestral value, and the people on it are doing the right forms of proper work. Okay. Let's do one more question, and then we're going to call this broadcast a done, because we've overloaded many of you with dragon questions. But when you sit and wait and work with the dragons, there might be another show. So who wants to ask the last question?
I have kind of a long one.
Okay.
So in summary, you've expressed how some dragons are caught in the system like the rest of us. Some dragons toy with those that feel that they are masters with no illumination, that those being toyed with need to gain control of their ego. This example implies that the dragons themselves have their own egos. Now, in prior teachings, you've indicated that we need to work with our ego in a symbiotic process, nullifying what isn't wanted and now creating it. Our technology has certain rules and processes that we need to learn to work with. How does their process in relation to their ego or skin suit technology differ from ours?
Beautiful question. And yes, dragons do have ego. They absolutely do have ego. And it was something that was fundamentally brought into them because from the celestial frequencies, oftentimes they won't tell a full truth. And when you have something acting as a medium with something built into its DNA technology to tell a deeper truth, to create a higher form of trust. This also puts the dragon in the unique situation of having an experience, even though it's not in a DNA instrument, a DNA skin suit instrument of experience. It still drives them to have an individuated aspect through the ego process. Now, the second part of your question, can you repeat that part?
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to how is their process in relation to the ego different from ours. So for example, you know, in our evolution, we need to identify where the ego has control and override it or outcreate it in certain respects. So in this concept of evolution and growth, what limitations does their ego impose and how are they interacting with their ego so that it doesn't create those limitations?
So their biggest thing is adoration and worship. That is their Achilles tendon from their ego, their Achilles heel from their ego, adoration and worship. It's very easy for lower density beings to adore and worship higher density beings. And therefore, when they allow that to happen, even the slightest form, their ego takes over and drives them into a deeper learning experience because the celestial being is their higher self trying to teach them about adoration and worship. So how is their process different? Their higher self is the celestial being. Our higher self is our stream of source light. Are we all still one? Technically, we're all still one galaxy, one still universe, one singularity and many layers of perspective and perception. So another way of seeing how their experience is different, especially when dealing with their version of ego. At times, there are celestial minds who have their version of ego, have extended arguments with other celestial minds of whose creation is better, who works faster, blah, 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 blah. As above, so below. They have their just different perspective on what it is in their nursery of life. My tomatoes are better than your tomatoes. So dragons oftentimes of their version of the higher soul, the debates and arguments, the as something that is actually imprinted to them. So when they run into, let's say, a you or a me that has a celestial energy in them that they used to live on this world, they can instantly summon up the charge and polarity of the past and dump it onto that little micro being who hasn't lived on that world for thousands of years. They have to learn their version of rapid adrenal impulse control. All right, that was a mouthful. People will be dissecting that one for a few weeks. All right, I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this super, super special Dense Galaxy Dragon broadcast. And we shall be on in another time space with very little warning, because today we're choosing to be unpredictable. Unpredictable. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you in the next Dragon Hour. Each different bubble of reality is true. A galactic historian is a person that looks at all the lines of dramatic karma. Nudge, nudge, it's the Holy Grail. Improvise. Mysterious. It's counter psychic intelligence.
Why is DNA farming of this star cluster so important?
Because we do manifest our reality. We do create our reality.